I'm a big fan of HubSpot. They're a B2B company that pioneered in offering free certification courses. And one of the persons behind HubSpot's Academy's early success is Chris LoDolce. He's the former director of HubSpot Academy. Now he's the founder of SaaS Academy Advisors, where he helps SaaS companies build their own academy. In this Marketing Power-Ups episode, you learn first, Chris' transformative customer education framework. Second, how to map out your customer education roadmap. Third, how to calculate the ROI of your customer education programs. And number 4, one power-up that's accelerated Chris' career. Before we get started, I've created a free power-ups cheat sheet that you can download and apply Chris' transformative customer education strategy to your business right away. You can get it now at marketingpowerups.com or find that link in the show notes and description. Are you ready? Let's go.
Marketing Power-Ups. Ready? Go! Here's your host, Rambly John.
Well, Chris, thank you for joining. I'm super excited to talk about, HubSpot Academy and SaaS Academy Advisors and helping companies with academies. I know you were one of the earliest professors at HubSpot Academy. What was that experience like? Was it like a moment of excitement at that time, or like more? I'm guessing it was a startup, maybe more of a sense of trying to figure stuff, or more like an adventure, really trying to figure out how you can make Academy work at HubSpot.
Happy to give some background there. Really interesting story. So when I joined HubSpot in 2011, there was a team of 3 people. Let's see if I can remember everybody. We'll get our Academy history at HubSpot straight. It was somebody by the name of Lucy, somebody by the name of Brian, Logan Reed, Lucy Orluck, Brian, Logan Reed, and then Mike Ewing. Shout out to Mike Ewing. Those 3 were working on what they called one-to-many training. Essentially, our customer base,
training.
Our small businesses. Back then, it was small, medium, large, whichever size product you want to buy. And small in 2011 was a $50 product. So the folks on that were your fencing companies, your HVAC companies. These were folks who were just getting online for the first time. Maybe they had a static one-page screenshot of their mailer, or picture of their mailer that was uploaded, and they were getting to this, what is blogging, how to use keywords, all of these things. So these folks, essentially, they were getting onboarding from a individual 8 hours or 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
And that was costing, basically the payback was really long, right? Because they're only paying $50. Just the onboarding was going to take us years to get that back. And so they were working on this idea of one-to-many training, which is essentially a series of webinars. And what we saw was that moved the needle a little bit, focused on teaching them how to use the product. But these folks were really busy, right? So coming to a webinar when they had a quote to go give or something else wasn't really working. Upmarket a little bit in our medium-sized businesses, we had the one-on-one consultants, which is what I was doing. And in that sense, it made, they were paying us hundreds of dollars, and that payback made sense to have a individual onboarding, experience. So for the smaller cohort, there was the first attempt, and we could see a little bit of the metrics moving in terms of retention and product usage, but not much. So as that team moved on to, I think Lucy went to do in-person training. Brian, Logan Reed started a new team. This was hyper growth at HubSpot. So everyone's working on different projects. Mike Ewing went to start a new team too, I think. And the next version of that was Mike Redboard, Sarah, Bedrick, and Ryan Brown. And that was the first time when that team was doing it, where they kind of came up with the idea of, let's call it Academy. But again, it was focused more at the smaller folks who we couldn't, financially make the metrics work for giving them a one-on-one onboarding experience. So it was a group experience. And similarly, we were able to see some metrics move, when it came to here's how to blog, here's how to use email. But not enough that it was really the right strategy to keep moving forward. So at that point in time, it was 2012. While this was all happening, myself, Mark Killens, and a bunch of other consultants, Andrew, we were called consultants back then, onboarding specialists today. We were all doing this one-on-one consulting. And what we were finding was we were essentially having the same calls, right? Lined up back to back, all next to each other, wearing that helicopter pilot, talking. And what we realized was we're doing the same thing. We're sharing, hey, I just made this Word doc, right? This is before Google Docs. So here's this Word doc with these 20 tips. It's, oh, let's turn that into a blog. Oh, can I send that to my customer? And what we realized was we were basically doing the same thing, even with our upmarket clients. We were still having the same conversations. We were still reviewing the same landing pages. We were still sharing the same best practices. We were still sharing the same blog posts. And so what we realized was, well, maybe there's something more to that. So Mark Killens, Julie Hogan, a couple other folks started what they called Content Camp. And the idea there was like, we're going to do webinars for customers. In 2011, this was like kind of a novel idea, right? Like webinars were lead gen. Now we have our customers like, cool. But it was like, let's create something. And so Mark and Julie and a couple other folks, Billy, McDonald, a few other folks started this thing. And Mark Killens really brought this new type of like energy to this. And it was like, okay, it's about using the product, but it's more about what are we using the product for? Why are we using the product? And so they had a nice blend of kind of best practices in those days. That's, we used the word best practices and kind of how to use the tools. And so 2012, the second iteration of Academy, those folks were going on to do different things. Mike Redbourn got promoted. Ryan Brown went to the marketing team. Sarah Bedrick joined Mark Killens and myself, Mark Killens being the manager, to do V3 of HubSpot Academy. So this is one of those things where it's like, we're in the CS team, we're consultants at this point, senior consultants, more customers than we could ask, more growth opportunity into management. And we were at this position where it's like, we know there's something, we know there's a code to crack. We're close to it. We feel it. These webinars are showing us there's something more than just this idea of onboarding training for small folks. Everybody wants to learn. And so to your question, as I set the scene, we went into this with like, there's something to figure out here. There's not a playbook that exists because most training was, in person, a la carte. We're going to build a bespoke training program for you, or we're going to do these kind of group webinars. So going into this, it was like Mark Killens leading Sarah, myself, and Mark. We were all professors, right? So we were all doing the teaching. And the goal of this training was really just to get folks to use the 3 apps that if all 3 of those apps within HubSpot were used, your retention was close to 100, whereas any other combination was 60% or low. Like it was, it was the early days of SaaS. We're still learning what churn or retention means. And so that was our goal. Marketing, the 3 apps that existed that basically we had to get folks to use was email, blog, and landing pages. If we flip that around, blog, how to attract people to your website, right? Landing page, how to convert folks to become leads, and then email, how do you engage those leads and hopefully get them sales ready? So again, like back in that day, the idea of a landing page to most folks was a completely, novice or a completely new idea. And so what we did for the first about 6 months to a year was essentially created 1-hour trainings where we broke down the education. We can definitely get more into that, but it was on each one of these topics. But first we set the scene of how each of these apps fit into your greater inbound marketing strategy. And again, the focus was, let's get people to use the products and the tools. Back then, again, people were they might have been on Internet Explorer, and Internet Explorer didn't work with HubSpot, right? So it was like something as simple as making sure they were using the right technology. A lot of these folks were marketers who went to school prior to computers and the internet being used in daily business life. So there was a lot of that. And then on top of that, how do you actually use the software? And so for us, that was the focus, is just teaching those classes multiple times a week and not just saying, here's how to do it, but sharing the best practices, sharing like the methodology where they were in their marketing kind of ecosystem, and then doing workshops. So we would actually have people in real time build their landing page and then share it out with everybody else and then give feedback in real time. Which again, now it's like, well, of course, like everyone does that. Back then it was hard to get folks to share, right? It's like their work that, and so that was really year 1, was figuring out that delivery method, figuring out how we are from the back end. I like to say with educational content, front end, the user experience, how it looks. The back end is the coding, right? How are we creating learning objectives? how are we testing against them? How do we make sure that folks have actually learned? But then the beautiful thing with technology and SaaS is the actions and behavioral changes they've taken based off of those learnings, which translates to product usage, which then ideally, if the product is used correctly, translates to results, which then of course means upgrades, hopefully cross-sells, hopefully, but at least retention.
I love how like the products are tied to the inbound flywheel that I know HubSpot was like really evangelizing about, the attract, engage, and then like the convert or like the light, and really like you attach it to like three use cases or features: the landing page, the email, and then the blog, which makes a ton of sense there. How did you land? I guess I'm curious how you landed on those three. Like, how did the team figure out, like, or did it just make sense? Because like this is the three things that you need to do to accomplish this flywheel. This three.
Yeah, it's a great question. So our data team, our analytics team figured that out. Looking at product app usage and retention, we're doing like cohort analysis. So they're the ones who figured that out, which was definitely helpful for us. Believe it or not, those were not the tools at the time which were closing the most deals. We had some social tools. So people were buying for social. There were some people who were using the social tools a ton, but that didn't translate to retention, right? So some of our most popular tools weren't some of the tools that were the most, that drove the most retention. Like one of our most popular tools back then was you could see essentially the country and like region of America where somebody, or anywhere in the world where someone was coming from. Like that data, just giving that to marketers back then, that was like Alexa on steroids. And so it's like, people love that, right? People got that, but that usage had no correlation to retention. Right? Cause it was cool to see, but was it helping your business grow?
Yeah.
Was it getting more leads in the door? Like, no, it wasn't. And so that's, it was definitely the data team, the product team looking at those metrics, and then us coming in and saying, okay, we've got to figure this out. The layup that we got, and I always like to say this, HubSpot Academy was standing on the shoulders of a giant or on the top of a mountain, and we had a microphone. And so we were really fortunate in the situation we were in because we had this business that was growing quickly. We had phenomenal leadership who was spending the time learning from the, generation one of SaaS companies, the Salesforces, the Boxes, everybody who had come before HubSpot. And so we had a really good platform and audience to bring folks into, but we also had the methodology. So when I started HubSpot, version one of the methodology was get found, convert, analyze. Right? So there's 3 phases, and that was because that's what HubSpot offered. Tools to get found. I mean, this was like the days of our co-founders getting on phone with customers and like helping them rank on Dig, right? Like that was a big deal, right? How do you get found? And then the convert was landing pages, and the analyze was just the analytics of how did people get to your website and what percentage of them filled out a form. That was it. Right. And as HubSpot grew, they had to make a strategic decision, which was we're going to go, they called it Mary Mofu monetization. I think there's a Harvard case study on it now, but it was like, okay, Mary, which was our persona, which was mid-market, not owner Ollie, which was the individuals that you were just talking about, trying to educate. And then Mofu is middle of the funnel, right? Our email tools, all of these different tools, and then monetization, right? How are we going to monetize that? And so as we moved to that, what we realized was, well, wait a second, get found, convert, analyze, that methodology, which was in the original inbound book and on every single presentation anyone gave, was no longer as relevant. It was being used less at the business. So Mark Killens led the charge with the Academy team and folks around the business to come up with our second version, which at that point was attract, convert, close, and delight. And it told a really nice linear story around, how you're going to, these strangers are going to find you, how you're going to convert those strangers into known leads, and then, engage with those leads to a point where they become a customer. And then once they're a customer, it's time to help them and help delight them so that in turn, they attract more people to your website. Excuse me. So that methodology then involved another time a few years later, 2018, 2019, when Brian Halligan, as he's looking at the market, the executive leadership team, the board, the investors, all the people are looking around and saying, what's the future? And very quickly, they realize this idea of a linear approach to the customer experience, it was outdated. And that's when HubSpot Academy updated everything again, to bring in this idea of a flywheel and force and friction and what that means. And so the real takeaway here, the nugget I would say, is that without something like HubSpot Academy being built over those 6 years or so at that point, for a business to be able to say, okay, we're now going to update this methodology, which is splattered across thousands and maybe even hundreds of thousands of websites, explaining this is what inbound marketing is, this is what inbound, this is how you do it. Now we're going to change from a linear to a flywheel. It still took us 2 or more years to really get that into the market, but we were able to update our certification, which hundreds of thousands of people had this inbound marketing certification. We were able to say, look, your certification, every year, every 2 years it expires. When you take it again, times have changed. Business, tech has evolved. Yeah. Here's how we're thinking about customers. And we were able to essentially re-educate the market with this really powerful tool, HubSpot Academy. If you're a business and you don't have a way to educate your customer base, all of your stakeholders, whether they're customers, industry folks who are learning from you, partners, if you don't have that, it's going to be really hard to evolve your business and to release new tools that fit into the methodology you're currently teaching. So it's easy to bring new customers on, but you're leaving everyone behind. And we know how important it is, especially today with efficient growth. How do you continue to nurture the people who have invested in you and given you the money to continue to grow, and not just say, thank you, let's focus on new folks. So the Academy really was that, and still today is very much a big piece of the entire experience somebody has with HubSpot, even if they've never purchased the product and never planned to.
That's super interesting that it's like this approach, as you evolve your framework and approach, you're also bringing those Academy learners along for the journey so that they get updated along as well, which is super interesting.
Exactly.
I want to ask about that interesting thing you mentioned around like how most people signed up in the early days for HubSpot for that social piece. And I guess is that where HubSpot Academy fit? Like, how do you get them to level up and like use the 3 things that you mentioned earlier, the landing page, blog, and email? Or was it something else that, is that part of the thought process? Like, how do we educate our customers so that they eventually adopt this other features essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. It was how do we educate our users so that they understand the importance of these apps? Because when we dug into the data, it wasn't that they were just like sending email. It was that the email tool was actually driving value for the business. Right? The blogging tool was the number one tool to drive qualified traffic to the website, not getting on Dig or back then it might have been, it was keyword stuffing, put 1,000 keywords, make them white, on the background of your white website. So easy, right? But now you're getting all this traffic. We had a Facebook plugin. I remember with a customer, we did a giveaway for a plow. And we got it was something like 12 or 13,000 leads. And that actually worked because it was a B2C application, but for B2B companies, it wasn't working. So for us, it was very much, how do we explain where these tools fit into the success of their business? And it was very much to what you had brought up originally about that methodology. It's like, we have a map for you. Here's the map. These people don't know who you are. You don't know who they are. And these are people who are paying for your services and love you. Yeah. Here are the 3 tools that if you use them and you use them, in unison with a unified approach or strategy is going to bring you more business. And I think it was as much us teaching that content as it was that map, that methodology. And you'll see that with a lot of companies, top right on any G2 quadrant you look at, those companies in the top right have a point of view on the market. They have an approach, whether that's, Gainsight and their methodology and how to think about customer success and, this evolution of the chief customer officer, whether it's Gong, whoever it is, they have this approach. Sometimes it's more prevalent on the website. Sometimes it's less, but they have a point of view in the market and they're able to connect that point of view to the product. And you probably know this for FQs, right? And then they're able to, over time, evolve that point of view as their business grows, as they add more features, as they go into new segments of the market and continue to tell that story. And that's where, the storytelling piece of education really comes in, is being able to evolve that story and teach folks how to continually be successful with a growing product.
I feel like you're starting to get into like the transformational education you're talking about, like how, educational content and academies like this can really help, like, that behavioral change and like help it. Yeah, really. Can you talk a little bit about that transformational education that you want to chat about?
Definitely. So I always like to say one of the most exciting parts about being on the educational side, in SaaS specifically versus in whether it's L&D or any other part of the world, is that the educational content that is consumed, we can track the consumption and how someone's consumed that. We can then track how impactful it was in terms of, was somebody able to remember? Were they able to analyze it? We can use kind of Bloom's taxonomy to look at that and say, okay, what did somebody learn or not learn? And that's mostly where our analytics stop when it comes to higher education, or, any other type of traditional education. What we can do with educational content, educational programming in SaaS is then say, what were the behavioral changes of this individual? And what did that lead to in their job, in their career? So when we talk about transformational education or transformative educational experiences, the goal isn't to tell somebody what to do. The goal isn't even just to tell somebody how to do something, or why they should do it. The goal is to put these three things in context: why this matters for their business, why this matters for their career. And when I say why it matters for the business, it's the goals, it's the growth, it's all of that. For their career, it's potentially a promotion, a new job, whatever that may be. And how do we mix those things together for them to see how this is going to truly benefit them to learn it, and then put that in the context of what are the ideal approaches, right? What are the strategies? That's the how. Here's how you're going to do it. So we're going to contextualize that philosophy, these ideas, into that how, into the strategy. And then we just have the what. Here's what you need to do, right? This is maybe more of the building a landing page, whatever it is. So that framework we definitely use. We stole that from Simon Sinek. One could argue he found it from somebody else. Start with why. Yep.
I like it.
But that worked incredibly well for us to then start tracking these behavioral changes. And when we look at HubSpot and we look at the advocates of HubSpot Academy, it was always the folks who had a transformative experience that would reach out to us, that would write blog posts about us. There's actually some podcasts out there. I can share the links with you, where these folks talk about and share their experience of finding HubSpot Academy, learning about inbound marketing, then, applying for an agency, getting a job, and growing their career based off of the educational content that was provided. And the fact that it wasn't, we need to get users to use that product. Great. Go show them how to use the product and make them sit there and watch your video for an hour. Right? It wasn't that. Yes, that was part of it. But our goal never, as we sat down in the room and we talked about success, our goal never was how many users looked at the the videos. We needed as many users as possible. Our A goal was to get users to those videos. But our question always was, how many folks did we create a transformative educational experience for? What behaviors did we change? And you'll see, if you go back on LinkedIn, you'll see Kyle Jeffs and other folks would always ask folks who posted on LinkedIn, what are you doing differently after taking that course? Yeah. And that's the transformative piece that we're tracking qualitatively to some degree in that sense. But man, some of those responses were awesome when you heard about how they changed their approach to sales or marketing and what those benefits were. If you change somebody's life, their career in any way, I shouldn't say you change it, you create an opportunity for them to change their own life. You give them that, they're going to be fans of yours forever. And the exercise I always love to do with that is just to tell folks to take a second and think about 1 to 3 teachers or professors that had a impact on who you are today, whether that's guiding you down a career path, whether that's, helping you maybe in a subject that you were interested, whatever that may be. usually somebody can think of that one or a few teachers that had that impact on them, that changed the trajectory of their life or transformed them. And if you think about who that professor was or that teacher was, or that mentor was, and you look at what was it about that person, and we're going a little bit in a rabbit hole here, but what you'll find is it was never the teacher who stood up there reading off slides. It was never the teacher with a monotone voice, right? It was somebody who you felt like they saw you. And lots of times it wasn't the same teacher that you felt saw you as your friends, right? But they saw you, they understood you, they listened to you, they taught in a way that resonated with you. They had passion for the subject. Right? All of those things video brings to the table that you can translate through educational content, whereas just a screen recording of somebody talking to it, as great as that content is like a brilliant person standing up in front of a lecture and doesn't engage the group. There is no dialogue. There is no passion in the topic, even though they've dedicated their entire life to whatever that is. And so when it comes to that transformative educational experiences, there's so much that goes into it to really, again, approach educational content, approach building an academy with that being the end goal. Of course, we have to look at all the metrics. If the metrics aren't there, it doesn't make sense. And let's get into the metrics. But if the goal is the metrics, you're very quickly forgetting that there's real people behind those user numbers, and educational content. Its power is uplifting and giving folks, sharing with folks that knowledge that they can use to grow themselves, to grow their businesses, to grow their careers, to create opportunities that otherwise they might not have been able to get. And that's what makes, at least for me, makes it so much fun to be in this industry, is being able to do that. And not just, originally it was in English, and now HubSpot Academy is in 6 languages, translated by communities in other languages. And it's just, it's powerful, right? These SaaS businesses today, at least, are giving a lot of this content away for free, and it's creating, at least a little bit more opportunity for folks maybe who otherwise wouldn't have access to a university, where traditionally this is where you get that information. And even today, universities are playing catch up with, SaaS academies, across all of the industries, because stuff changes every month, and who keeps that up to date? More often than not, it's a little bit easier to pivot when you're not a sanctioned educational body, by the state or the government. Definitely no knock on higher ed, because it's hard. I know it's hard what they're trying to do to keep up with technological changes. But yeah, it's definitely a special place to be in terms of education.
I really like how the focus is on the change in behavior, in I forgot who you mentioned that would reach out and be like, how did this course change your behavior? A lot of that qualitative stuff reminds us that what we're doing can transform, can change the way they do things, and really that's a huge impact to that. Instead of we mentioned around metrics, and there is humans behind those metrics that we need to remember. I love that. In terms of those metrics, what are some of those metrics that you do look at? I'm curious, obviously completion maybe, or adoption of features. I'm really curious what metrics you were looking at HubSpot, but as well as what you would now suggest for people who are interested in launching it. I know you help out different SaaS businesses with launching their academies, what metrics they should be looking at.
Yeah. Okay. There's a few different ways to break down the metrics. This is a fun one. The first thing I just say from a high level is, if you're trying to use an academy as a solution to help solve for one strategic initiative at your business, that's a departmental strategic initiative, chances are this is going to be a step function of a team that has 1 or 2 people and never actually really grows or reaches its full potential. If you look at any business, again, if you're looking at Gong, or you're looking at Salesforce Trailhead, HubSpot Academy, there's a ton of great examples out there today. You'll find that these companies have approached the academy as a way to provide educational content from pre-sales, industry content, all the way through their customer experience. So when we look at metrics and we look at data, what I find the easiest to do is create 3 buckets. You have the impact on the business and top line business metrics, right? Churn, CAC, LTV, all of those things. We can talk about that. Then we have your departmental metrics. So if we go down one level from churn, what are we looking at in terms of CS org? And we're looking at renewal rates, we're looking at upsells, we're looking at cross-sells, some things in there, product usage, etc. And then we're going to go take a deflection for support. From there, we're going to go to our program metrics. And that's what you had mentioned around like completion rates. How many people are completing the courses? What is their average score when it comes to tests? Or what percentage of people are certified? What percentage of people getting recertified? What percentage of people who have a certification are giving an NPS of 9 or 10 promoters versus, detractors? So there's a lot of things that we kind of move through in each of those three sections. So from the business side, over the years, depending on where HubSpot Academy sat, we started in the customer success org, and then we went from customer success to marketing. So when we were in customer success, it was absolutely product usage, which we knew translated to retention. And so it was 2015, we had green in 15. So we're looking at our retention charts. Our goal is to get people, I want to say, to use 5+ apps. Because by 2015, it was 5 people used 5+ apps. That cohort had the highest retention. How are we going to get customers to use 5+ apps? And so the application, how HubSpot Academy evolved, we actually created additional tools, not just e-learning videos. We started creating what we called projects, where step-by-step, essentially, guides that integrated both educational learning, knowledge, industry experts, all into kind of what maybe people would know as Notion today. There's some interesting things there. We're actually working on redeveloping that tool to help folks. But really the idea there was, okay, we know these metrics. How are we going to use HubSpot Academy in that context? So that was one way. Then we started looking and finding that the folks who were buying HubSpot that already had the inbound certification pre-purchase went on to basically reach time to value, adopt those tools much more quickly than customers who didn't have a certification. So for a while, the sales team could offer up to, I think it was a 15 or 20% discount on the software, or waive the onboarding fee if you had a industry certification, inbound marketing certification before you bought, right? And that's when the business was very much focused on, how are we bringing in new folks, and not just anybody? Of course, say yes, but how do we say yes to the right folks, or spend our time with the folks who are going to grow with us, and we can add the most value for? So it changed over time, but really, what we were looking at was retention. If you looked at the cohort of logos that had one or more users logging in to HubSpot Academy on a monthly basis versus the cohort who didn't, you would always find that the cohort of folks logging in was higher, right? And this was the forever argument that exists, which is causation or correlation. Is it just that people who were going to be successful committed the time to learn versus those who weren't going to be successful? And it's like, yeah, probably a good percentage of that is the case. And so, what the executives who are advocates for HubSpot Academy would always say is, okay, so let's just get rid of HubSpot Academy. Well, where are these people going to go learn? Exactly. Right. Like, you could get rid of it, but and you could be right to say, HubSpot Academy isn't the thing that's actually driving the 10% increase, the 10-point increase in retention. But without it, what is that retention going to look like? Is it going to look like everybody else? Is it just going to be down 5 points?
Yeah.
So it was this interesting conversation. So when it comes to ROI, it can be tricky to be like, educate, here's an exact percentage increase in retention because of HubSpot Academy or because of your academy. But without fail, what you'll find is folks who are engaging with these learning resources, HubSpot, or the clients that we work with, that retention number is higher. The adoption numbers typically is higher. The question is, how much of that raise in retention or product usage is directly correlated to, or, there's direct causation between those and not just correlated. And so that's the tricky part with the business metrics. But I mean, every business metric we looked at, we would find there was a positive impact when we measure that. There's some interesting ones too. I'll throw out one interesting one, which was the time to close. So what our sales team would do a lot back in the day was they'd have a call with somebody, say, have a Marketo contract, or I have a Sharp Spring, or whatever the competitors were at that time. 6 months. I really want to join, I really want to switch over. Can you get back to me in 6 months? Well, what the sales reps would do would be like, hey, you got 6 months.
Yeah.
I know what your goals are. Go take this certification
For free at
get
that time.
for free.
Yeah.
For free. Get back to me. Let me know how it goes. Right. The sales rep
Yeah.
could see when they completed it, if they completed it. So when you looked at if somebody took the certification pre-sale, what was their time to close? It was actually longer because most of the time it was being used as a way to keep folks engaged versus just the drip emails.
Mm.
When then you actually started dissecting that and looking a little bit more closely, what you found was if people entered into a opportunity or a qualified lead and were engaged with your sales rep, and then that inbound certification or the academy was shared, that actually helped close deals more quickly in that first 30 days. After that, it was skewed. The metric was being skewed because people were using it as a nurturing tool and to keep people engaged, which was a super interesting metric initially to be like, wow, time to close. HubSpot Academy slows it down. Who wants that, right? Like, don't let anybody pre-customer, pre-sales touch it. To wait a second. Actually, the reason why is because of how that was being utilized by the sales team. So that was interesting. And the other one from pre-sales or sales that we always tracked was the average discount rate. So the average discount rate on somebody who had consumed or taken the inbound certification was much lower. And we always just attribute that to the fact of somebody understood the suite of tools and how they were going to be used pre-sale versus showing up and saying, hey, I need a social tool and an email tool. And it's like, well, you're giving me all this other stuff, but I don't really need it. Right? Like I can just go get email from here and I can go get social from here. So let's just what can you give me at a discount? Right. So it was basically selling that vision. It was filling in that void for that consultative sales process. When there was times where, the sales team was inundated with leads or for whatever reason. So that was also helping, with, basically higher average contract prices.
I love how you sharing these examples is Academy can impact across the funnel, all the way from trying to close deal. You found that it did close it a little bit quicker, and then retention. I'm guessing it also helps with activation or trying to onboard. I mean, that was the initial reason why, right? You're trying to do one to many. So it's right across the whole flywheel and the journey of the user or the customer. It can have a ton of value to the whole experience to it. And you talking about it becoming more sticky, it ties back to what you mentioned earlier, how if you have that teacher that helped you, how much of a big fan you'll be with that about that teacher or professor. I think it's the same thing with this, where it's harder to prove causation, like you mentioned, but there is a strong hypothesis that you helping them, they feel good about the brand and they're more likely to stick around longer than they are if it's a more transactional experience. This feels more like I don't know, would you say it's more relationship focused, because you are building this educational transformative experience to them rather than just a buy and get kind of experience.
Yeah. I definitely more of that relational or relationship based approach for sure. And you see that. One story I love to share is Brian Halligan, who is the CEO, who was co-founder of HubSpot. He was always still probably today going to MIT teaching. He was a big believer in teaching, right? So HubSpot Academy was essentially a metamorphosis of Brian Halligan into a program. And I think a lot of HubSpot in general, that idea of teaching, him and Dharmesh were always teaching everybody internally and educating folks externally. Well, that resulted in myself learning about HubSpot, myself using HubSpot, then joining HubSpot, and then having that opportunity to essentially teach what Brian and Dharmesh were finding out to the market. And one of the folks who was in one of our first cohorts back in 2011 ended up starting a program, starting an agency, and now is one of the bigger agencies in Spain. He went on to start teaching in his universities. I was in Spain doing a talk. at his conference, and somebody came up to me who had met him in one of the classes as a student. She ended up joining the agency and was then teaching at her university what inbound marketing was, right? So it's not just like the relationship and the affinity to a brand, but it's the like, hey, this changed my life, right? And this isn't like a cult. This is like business strategies that are working. And I'm here to like, I want to share this with other people, right? It works. Like when you find something that works in business, it doesn't happen every day. There's a lot of snake oil sales going on. And when you find something, you want to share it. And that's the true power of the education, right? It's like when you learn and someone transforms your life or creates that transformative educational experience, you want to give that, you want to pass that on. And so just to be like in different part of the world and hearing that story and meeting somebody who, and just kind of talking backwards on how we, had come to learn about inbound, the power of that educational content. It's just so great. And the tricky part is if you don't have an executive who gets it, to try to sell what we're talking about now can be difficult. And so it usually means starting with an MVP. We can definitely get more tactical in a bit. There are ways to get there, right? There are ways. If you have an executive who's like, we want an academy, that's awesome. We love working with those businesses. If you're in that situation where you're one or two people in the CS org and you're trying to start an academy, the road's going to be a little bit more difficult. You can get there. But it's gonna definitely be a lot more transactional to begin, a lot more, quick, fast iterations. But yeah, it's, I always like to reiterate as many times as possible, like, the power of this education and how it grows your ecosystem and impacts your ecosystem can't be qualified today. Hopefully someday it can be quantified. It can be qualified, but quantified in a way that, we could bring a sheet to an executive team and say, here's every way it's impacting the ecosystem. But there's plenty of metrics that give it enough credibility to exist, even without some of these more high level impacts on the ecosystem.
That's such a cool story where like there's that almost fandom. Like I'm thinking of like Marvel or like Harry Potter, and now like there's this fandom around this you said cult, but like that's what they call Harry Potter heads or like Star Wars people. But there's this fandom around inbound, and I guess like my question around I'm curious like how it's almost a natural progression towards like building a community around this topic or this passion. Like people talk a lot about nowadays like cohort-based courses because like that builds a community. Was that a part of the early, like when did that get added into the whole ingredient where community and academy almost has this synergistic this symbiotic relationship with each other?
It's a great question. So I think something that HubSpot always prioritized community. The interesting thing was community as defined, I would say, by the industry today is much more of like people thinking of like forums and Slack channels. Community in 2011, 2012 was LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, and that was basically it for online. Maybe a few other side things, but there was no Slack back then. Right, HipChat, maybe there was, but not many people were using it. HipChat was like only open to, only confined to businesses. And so that was even the online portion of community was small. Where was HubSpot investing their money in community? Well, the inbound event. Right? Customers were getting cheap, if not free tickets, for many years, right? We were losing a lot of money. We were bringing everyone together there. We were then doing what we called hugs, HubSpot user groups. So, I forget her first name. Something Goodman was the CEO of Constant Contact, sat on HubSpot's board until we moved into the email space and there's a conflict of interest. But Constant Contact from the beginning did a really good job of having these local meetups. So what HubSpot did, we had, I want to say 50 chapters or more in the US and externally. We would take the biggest fans, the HubSpot agencies, power users, and we'd give them $5,000 or $2,000, whatever the stipend was each quarter to run an event. And we would, pull a list of everybody in that area, send them an invite and say, hey, we're going to like meet up and geek out about content or marketing or whatever the topic was. we'd love for you to come. By the way, free drinks, free apps, and we're sending a HubSpotter. So what this meant was folks like Andrew, myself, Mark, even product folks, we would go to these events. Right. So now all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, I'm just at this, like, I'm in, where is some of the place? I was Oklahoma. I was, Louisville. Like I was all over the place. Right. And you walk into this room and it's like, I always like to go back to the human experience. It's like, I'm a marketer, who maybe went to school for marketing, maybe didn't, found myself in this role. I have this software. I've talked to an amazing support team, and maybe I've learned online. Maybe I've seen Chris in a video from Academy. Maybe it was from a webinar, whatever it is. And now Chris is standing here in my town, which no people ever come to, right? And he's here sharing something that he's learning that is a collective knowledge from all of HubSpot's customers. And he's taking I still have so many of these HubSpot books. He's taking notes in his HubSpot books, right? And he's writing this down. He's getting my email address. And then he's going back, talking to the product manager of this tool that I'm having a problem with, and CCing that product manager in. The people who are building the product aren't hidden away, right? 2012, 2013, this was community. And I still am a big believer in that in-person piece, especially back then, showed that HubSpot cared. HubSpot cared about the person sitting in the office park in a small town in America where the lights are flashing and no one cares about marketing. It's just a waste of a possible sales rep. This is talking 2012, right? But like, what did marketing do? That's what everyone always used to say. That's not a question anymore. Everyone knows, right? We have the data, but that's what it was. And that showed HubSpot cared. And that's what built the community. And then you had your inbound event. And I mean, we had everybody, right? We used to have little pins that said, hug me, I'm a HubSpotter, right? Literally, people would come up and hug you. And it was all based off of Brian Darmesh starting this company and saying, people, it's all about people. It's all about those relationships, and it's all about helping folks. And so when it comes to community today, I mean, HubSpot, they have a community team. Academy sits under that team. And they're very much connected with their boot camps and things that they do online. Certainly haven't been there for 2 years, so can't speak to everything they're doing. But community and the community and Academy can create or help facilitate or be a part of it, is definitely a real thing. If you're taking an approach where you're actually putting real people on camera. Right? There's a lot of academies who are like, we'll do this fast. We'll get something out there. And then they never continue to iterate and improve, because it can be, high production for people on camera. But if there's not real humans at the business, it's really hard for that academy to facilitate the community or for people to feel a part of something. Right. So I'm always like, if the end goal isn't for us to have an academy where we have real life people, sometimes they're experts, but more often than not, people from your team teaching other people what you know. Without that, you lose a lot of that ability to create a community. You lose a lot of that ability, again, as we were talking about, of the transformation of the inspirational professor. If it's an AI, if it's an AI bot talking, it is, right? It's an AI avatar. And it just, is that how I want to learn? There might be some people that love it, but more often than not, I know that the person who programmed that avatar, I will probably never meet. I'll never know their intentions. I'll never be able to have a conversation with them. And at least today, still, more often than not, what we find is people want to learn from people. And that, that could be no video, but that's, hey, here's who we are. That could be a quick intro video. That could be a link to my LinkedIn profile. That could be a link to Slack to saying, hey, or if you have a community set up, come talk to me here, ask questions here. But it's that accessibility. It's that two-way. It's the difference of going to a small class versus an auditorium filled with people. And you saying like, maybe I'll talk to the TA, but I'm probably never going to actually talk to the professor, and they're never going to see my work. How inspired does anybody feel from that? Right. So it's all about creating that experience so that it facilitates and makes somebody want to be part of your community. Because if you spend 4 hours learning from an experience that doesn't add value to your relationship with the business, like that's a lot of time. How many calls do you have to have with the CSM or to be on support, a call with support to equal 4 8 hours of time, right? That's years possibly, or at least a half year or maybe multiple years. That amount of time your learners are interacting and engaging with your business is in that training. And so that training is very important of how it's presented, how it's trying to connect with the community, cross-linking to the community. Some companies do great stuff with cohort training where it's like, do your work, share it on this thread, then make sure you comment on on somebody else's work before the next call, the next, session of the cohort. So there's lots of like tactical ways to integrate it in. But I would say like when I think of community, I think of how are you going to impact people's lives, connect with those people, give them a way to connect with you, and be able to empower them to share what they've known with other people, right? Because the more we can facilitate that, even if it's not tracked, even if it's not a way that we own that in our community, love to have our own membership communities where we can keep everything. But I mean, more often than not, folks are connecting, on calls at different events, and we just want them to be able to facilitate and share the knowledge they have with their peers and their coworkers.
I love that. I think that really resonates. I got a chance to talk to Christina Garnett. She runs the Hub fans community right now. Yeah. So like everything you said about like the human touch and delighting them, it just builds that deeper connection that makes it. This is what I told. Like it makes it even harder for people to churn away because like they're not just leaving the product; they're leaving their people. They're leaving their the people that's helped them grow and transform, and also the people that they really connect with in a different level. So I think that adds an extra layer of stickiness than just like here, let me help you use our product to like let me help you level up in your career, and now like let me be your friend. And you're not churning from the product; you're churning from. You're not necessarily breaking up our friendship, but like there is that lost opportunity there once you do leave.
I love that you say that, and that's like the boomerang, right? So it's like somebody leaves the business, goes to another business, and the first thing they want to do is bring HubSpot with them, right? Because they want to get back in that business, or they are only looking for jobs that have HubSpot. Salesforce does a great job of this too with Trailhead, but with HubSpot, we saw that many times, right? I'm bringing HubSpot with me. I'm not going there. Part of the agreement is if I am coming, I'm bringing HubSpot. So there is the FOMO, maybe not FOMO, but that want to continue to learn and grow from that community, and not miss out not miss out on learning and growing together as a bunch of business professionals in sales, marketing, or services or operations now.
I love that. Thank you for sharing all of this. I want to actually shift gears and talk about career power-ups. I know that you have been in marketing for over a decade. You've spent actually 9.5 years of that at HubSpot, like have many roles there. Ended up becoming director of HubSpot Academy. I'm curious, what's like a career power-up that's helped you accelerate your career at HubSpot or anywhere else now that you're here at started your own thing with SaaS Academy Advisors?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it a few times throughout this call, but I would say it's this idea of getting your first 100 transformative educational experiences with folks. If you have 100 people who say, because of the work I did with X, because of the things I learned from X, my career is now, my results are now, my life is now. 100 of those. Get 100 of those people, and don't sit there trying to figure out how you can automate that 100. Because even if you could automate that 100, you're not going to know what were the things along the way that did that. So certainly you're probably going to have automation. Right? I'm not saying don't use automation. I'm not saying, don't use email tools, don't use, any type of automation tool. But this idea of if I can transform 100 people's lives or create transformative educational experiences for 100 people, I am going to have 100 people who are willing to stand behind me and say, not, I give Chris 5 stars. I give SaaS Academy 5 stars, but say, here's how, again, working with, learning from has impacted or changed my program, my career. That's it. And if you can get 100 people, you can probably get 100 people in anything that you put your mind to. The question is, how long is that going to take? And how much effort is that going to take? Right? And so when you're starting something like SaaS Academy Advisors, for me, it's very much like, we were talking about this before we started recording. Like I have 2 calls a week with anybody who wants to chat about building a SaaS Academy, right? On our website, you can literally go to the place where it's like geek out with me. And it's like, my promise for this hour is I'm never going to sell you anything. I'm not going to send you a pricing link,
cool.
nothing. Like, let's just talk. And that reason is because one of my goals is to get to that first 100. We're probably at 40 right now, but it's like to be able to get there, I need so many perspectives and insights to be able to provide that back out again. And so that's, I would say, my marketing power up. If we zoom down on, it's all about the people. You can't forget about the people behind the numbers, and what they're trying to do, and really focusing on helping them elevate themselves, get to that 100. Get 100 of those folks who stand behind you and say, yes, I can vouch for this, and here are the results that I can show you. Not because they're my friend, not because they're my network, not because they're asking a favor. That to me is the power up that I would love, and I'd love to be able to hop over a star and get those 100 tomorrow.
That's cool.
Because the knowledge you get from those experiences will take you where you want to go.
I feel like that also there's like this feedback loop where like the more that you like connect with those 100 people, the more likely it kind of evolves the way you think and maybe like help shape how you approach things. There is like this cycle of like learning, almost like you're learning from me as much as I'm learning from you, and that it's like a very healthy, it's a transformative experience for both sides, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I'm saying like get your first 100, but you probably have to talk to a couple thousand. But I think from the folks in UI UX are probably like, obviously this is what they do, right? You got to talk to people.
Right.
But it is very much, the opportunity to learn. Like, for example, as I've talked to more and more folks in the, SaaS Academy or more customer education segment of educational programming at SaaS businesses, something that keeps coming up is like discoverability, right? We create this content, we create this academy, we spend all this time, not just writing something, but creating backwards plans with learning objectives that we're going to have tests to track against that. And we're going to tie that into product usage and data. And we're going to do all these things. And then where is everybody? Well, CS has their priorities, marketing has their priorities. And now all of a sudden I'm trying to fight to get access to this thing that the business has paid for me to develop. So discoverability can be a big issue. And that's why we're, working on some free tools right now. Cause we're like, we know some things that we've done in the past that, these teams don't have access to website pages. They don't have access to a lot of these tools that they need for discoverability of their own marketing. Like, let's just create some tools, give these individuals access to these tools. And here's another opportunity to create a transformative educational experience through a tool. And so, yes, absolutely to your point, is it equally beneficial to the person who's trying to create those first 100, raving fans? Arguably more, right? Like when I think about what we've learned in the past 2.5 years of this business, I would still probably my messaging would not be resonating with folks as I'm talking to them. I would not nearly have the perspective I have on the industry now than I did leaving HubSpot, right? Left HubSpot and it's like, we knew how to build an academy. I learned very quickly that I knew how to build HubSpot Academy at HubSpot. Looking back 9 years. But what I didn't know, and what I've learned a lot and quickly is how much even just the culture at a business can change the approach to creating content. It is so mind-opening when I started working with different businesses and realizing like, how do people learn internally? How is information shared internally? How is information valued internally? Some businesses are like, if you spend time outside of your job creating educational content, like that puts you up here. In other businesses, it's like, why are you spending the time doing that? That's like so-and-so's job. And so there's just so many different things in terms of how it's valued and seen that's going to dictate the business, right? Some businesses are like, if it's not perfectly on brand with where this 10-year-old business is, don't publish it. Right. And other businesses are like, you're just starting this, like test, iterate, and go, right? Like click record. Don't worry about your lighting. Don't worry about your makeup. Who cares? Just go. And both approaches can work. how you facilitate those approaches, right? Or only hiring this country. We're only hiring this country. We want to hire in all the countries. All of those things completely change the approach while still trying to be human, right? Still trying to bring to the table all these things. So it is definitely, it is, I kind of went down a rabbit hole, but it is an important aspect to think about.
If you enjoyed this episode, you'd love the Marketing Power-Ups newsletter. I share the actionable takeaways and break down the frameworks of world-class marketers. You can go to marketingpowerups.com to subscribe, and you'll instantly unlock the 3 best frameworks that top marketers use to hit their KPIs consistently and wow their colleagues. I want to say thank you to you for listening, and please like and follow Marketing Power-Ups on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you're feeling extra generous, kindly leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and leave a comment on YouTube. It goes a long way in others finding out about Marketing Power-Ups. Thanks to Mary Sullivan for creating the artwork and design, and thank you to Faisal Kaigo for editing the intro video. And of course, thank you for listening. That's all for now. Have a powered up day.
Marketing Power-Ups. Until the next episode,